I'm sharing with you today an image of a true Southern delicacy, if we could have it. I give you the hush puppy. A culinary mainstay, the primary starchy side dish for seafood platters and pulled pork plates from the Gulf Coast to the North Carolina mountains and beyond. Recipes will vary. Spicy or bland, dense or heavy, light or fluffy, cooked in lard or even vegan. Sweet or salty, personal preference. They should be salty as the Lord intended. Just as anyone who makes cornbread, do not put sugar in the cornbread. Point of personal privilege, I will continue. But no matter, spice, pepper, garlic, onions, light, heavy, hush puppies are simply fried dollops of cornmeal, fried, floating cornbread, and they are delicious. Just as varied as the recipe for hush puppies are all the theories on where these little rascals originated. Robert Moss, a Charleston, South Carolina writer who is the senior barbecue editor for Southern Living. That's the job I want when I grow up, right there. How do you get that job? He's actually the world's most foremost authority on the history of hush puppies. He says the ancient indigenous tribes of North America had been frying corn ground down for untold centuries, particularly the Creek, the Cherokee, and the Seminole of the Deep South. But they were making flat corn cakes that looked a lot like tortillas. They weren't making hush puppies. Mountain folks in Appalachia, we have been frying corn for a long time as well when we first intermingled with these native tribes. But we have been making pones, corn dodgers, cornbread, fried in iron skillets. Chuckwagon cooks in the West were frying cornbread as well to soak up the pot liquor of their one-pan community stews, but they weren't making hush puppies. Hush puppies were invented by Romeo Gavon in the low country of South Carolina. He called his creation red horse bread. I'll get to that. Romeo was born a slave, but as an emancipated survivor of the Civil War, he leased a few acres along the Edisto River with his wife Sylvie, and they began hosting fish fries. Red horse bread was named after the redfish that would swim up the tidal creeks, red and as big as a horse's head. Romeo was the first to deep fry cornbread, right in the lard where the fish had been fried. He invented the method, and soon his culinary skills spread far and wide, so much so that his fish fries enabled him to buy the few acres he had once leased, an incredible feat for a former slave, and he died there on that property, living until 1915. But his deep-fried cornmeal batter lived on. On the Georgia side of the Savannah River, just south of Romeo Gavon's legendary outdoor kitchen, red horse bread became known as hush puppies for the first time. Yes, you can thank Georgia for that. And by the mid-1920s, the First Methodist Church in Macon, Georgia, began having annual fish fries with hush puppies as a staple, according to the Macon Telegraph newspaper. A few years later, these puppies were served at political gatherings in Tallahassee, Florida, and Waukeula Springs. Then all along the coast. In World War II, that great collecting and homogenizing event spread hush puppies far and wide to wherever a basket of boiling lard could be found. But why this name, hush puppy? Back to Robert Moss. Quote, originally, hush puppy was a slang term for silencing someone. Hush puppy methods covered up scandal, kept people quiet. Thus, Cornmeal with water, salt, and egg, dropped by spoonfuls into the fryer, would quiet the growling dogs in your stomach while waiting for the fish to fry. And I'll add this, and these hush puppies would pacify all the begging dogs inevitably drawn to the sights, sounds, and smells of a delicious fish fry. Throw the dogs a few morsels. Here, hush, puppy. That is the origin. The South owes Romeo Gavon a debt of culinary gratitude for his red horse bread and the origination of deep-fried cooking. So does every state fair outside the South, where everything from corn cobs to Oreo cookies are now coated with batter and tossed into the fryer. He invented it. But the hush puppy name didn't start with him. And while I am loath to take issue with anyone who has earned the title Senior Barbecue Editor at Southern Living Magazine, I don't think Robert Moss got it exactly right. Govan with the technique? Absolutely. Hush puppy being first used in the South at a church fish fry? Absolutely. To quiet growling stomachs and dogs. But you cannot tell me that a bunch of Macon, Georgia Methodists 100 years ago didn't know the New Testament. It isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs, Jesus said. And the woman to whom he was speaking replied, "True, my Lord, but even the dogs under the table are allowed to eat the scraps." Here is the first use of the term hush puppy. Circa 29 AD, in a seaside fishing village of Tyre on the Mediterranean Sea. You read this story and you can smell the cheese grits, collards, and fish frying from here. And if those Methodists were worthy of their founder, John Wesley, then they surely made this association fairly quickly. I've never spoken from this text in Mark 7 as far as I can remember, but I've always been intrigued by it. And I suspected even as a child that if the dogs were eating the scraps from the children's plates, obviously they were sitting at the kids' table and they were throwing something to these dogs to make them be quiet. Hush puppies indeed. What a wonder of a story this is. Jesus leaves his usual stomping ground with his disciples, travels north out of Galilee to Tyre. Some manuscripts add Sidon as well. To our knowledge, this is as far north as Jesus ever traveled in his life, some 75 miles from his childhood home. But it may as well have been the backside of the moon. Anna was right. Tyre was removed not only by distance, but by lifestyle and custom. Galilee was distinctively Jewish. Jewish culture, Aramaic language, familiar, homegrown traditions. Tyre was distinctively Gentile. Canaanite culture, the Greek language, foreign, strange customs. For Jesus and his disciples to travel north like this, they were essentially crossing the border into a completely different country. And as such, Jesus tried to do so secretly. And that gives me a chuckle. Jesus as a border jumper. Jesus sneaking into town with his brooding, suspicious crew. You see, his crew, the disciples, were all good Jewish boys, at least by birth and raising, even if there was some real ideological diversity among the 12. For example, Matthew had been a Roman sympathizer, a tax collector. Meanwhile, Jesus has a disciple named Simon the Zealot. And because he gets that title, the Zealot, he was just short of being a domestic terrorist. Definitely on the Roman do not fly list. Peter, Andrew, James, and John, they're just good old boys. Camo-wearing, tobacco-chewing fishermen. But none of these guys would have thought that a foray into enemy territory 75 miles from home on foot was a good idea. But at this point in the life and ministry of Jesus, Jesus really didn't have a choice. His journey north, while feeling dangerous to his disciples, was an act of personal safety. Pull away for a broader view just a moment. Down in Jerusalem, John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin, friend, mentor, and baptizer, had been executed by King Herod. And then King Herod gets the idea in his head that Jesus up in Galilee is somehow John raised from the dead. And some of Jesus' enemies are in on it as well, whispering in Herod's ear that Jesus is a threat. And then they go and tell Jesus that his head is the next one on Herod's chopping block. And so, by going north, Jesus escapes Herod's jurisdiction altogether. He has made a border crossing so that the heat on him will cool off. A few weeks out of the country, and Herod will move on to some other target to harass. Consequently, Jesus arrives in Tyre incognito, secretly. But he can't keep it a secret. News of his miraculous powers had spread into the northern territories just as news had traveled south to Jerusalem to Herod. He is a prophetic celebrity. Mark 7:25 sets the scene. Right away, a woman who had heard about Jesus came and fell at his feet. Her little girl was possessed by an evil spirit, and she begged him to cast out the demon from her daughter. Do you know the word cathartic? Oh, it was just a cathartic experience. Do you know what it means? This cleansing, a good cry, get it all out. Cathartic is a purging. Well, the word for evil here is a-cathartic, anti-cathartic. Whatever is going on here, the little girl can't get free. She can't get released or find relief for her condition. So this is a desperate woman, a desperate mother who seeks Jesus out, believing that he is the only solution to her daughter's condition. I hope you will keep my sister in your thoughts as I thought of her in light of this text all week. Her oldest daughter, Cadence, is 22 years old and profoundly autistic. And even by saying that, autism is not actually the correct diagnosis. Cadence has Tatum-Brown-Raham syndrome, TBRS for short. It is a condition as complex as it is rare. It is a multi-system dysfunction. It's characterized by overgrowth in height and size. Cadence is 6'3" and over 250 pounds. Intellectual disability, behavior and psychiatric problems, inability to communicate verbally, congenital heart disease, and prone to leukemia and other challenges. The human body has 46 chromosomes, the threaded ladder of your DNA. Your chromosomes contain 100,000 individual genes. Cadence has one single pathogenic variation on chromosome 2 within gene DNMT3A. Less than 200 people in the world have this mutation. I know my sister's age and physical ability because she is my twin. She cannot care for her daughter any longer in their home. It's not that she has quit. She just can't do it. For 22 years, she has been the primary caregiver for this child, along with how many other kids does she have? 4 other children? She must seek to accept the things that she cannot change, while desperately seeking the right place, the right facility where Cadence will be protected, cared for, and treated with both good medicine and proper dignity. Of all the people you will meet, those who have the deepest angst, I think, are those with chronically ill children, or those whose children have special needs or who require lifelong medical care, who worry what will happen to their children when their parents, are gone. So let's bring some real world, close to home, easy to identify desperation to this nameless woman who has found Jesus hiding in a seaside cottage. Of course, she has found him. The only thing stronger than the angst of having a suffering child is the will and effort to somehow alleviate that suffering. A parent will travel any distance, take any risk, endure almost any hardship if it holds the possibility of success or solution. They will at least try. And those of us not in that situation, only by the grace of God, should be oh so slow to judge those who are in that situation and who take heroic measures or make choices that we can't understand. Of course we can't understand, but we can understand the motivation because all of us know what it is like to love someone. And I do hope you know this, to love someone for whom you would do anything for. Anything. So here she is, our new foreign friend. She's not an object lesson, she's a human being. She is on her face at the feet of Jesus, begging Him to take her case, to do something, pleading, praying, negotiating, trying. And she is doing this begging not only because of what she wants, but because of who she is. The hush puppies are about to drop into the fryer. She was a Gentile woman born in Syrian Phoenicia, the story tells us. The rabbis of Jesus' day had a common prayer. The devout would pray it every morning. Here is a variation of it from a fragment older than the Talmud, older than the story that we read here. I thank Thee, O God, that Thou hast made me a human and not a dog, a man and not a woman, an Israelite and not a Gentile, free and not a slave. You dive further into the rabbinical literature, Gentiles, non-Jews, were always referred to by Jewish critics as dogs, the outcast, the outsiders. Not your cute and fuzzy little pets, but mangy, vicious beasts to be avoided. Jesus knows this prayer. He was raised with it. He heard it every morning. And here he is in a Gentile country, a Gentile village, in a Gentile's home, most likely, and a Gentile woman approaches him, and by her approaching him, she has 2 strikes against her already. She is a Gentile, and she is a woman. And the clever Jesus prepares to throw the 3rd strike. Should I feed the children, my own family, the Jews, first? It isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs. Did Jesus just call her a dog? Yeah, sort of. But He also, pardon the pun, throws her a bone with a pun of His own. When Jesus uses the word dog here, you're not going to believe this, it is the only time in the entire New Testament that the word is used. He doesn't refer to the beasts, the outcasts, the mangy dogs. Literally, he says this: it isn't right to take food from children and throw it to a puppy. And if this is the third strike against her, Jesus has telegraphed that it is coming, and she knocks it out of the ballpark. She says in reply, "That's true, Lord, but even we puppies under the table are allowed to eat the scraps. Even hungry, begging, whining dogs can get a hush puppy every now and then." And what does Jesus say in return? Winner, winner, chicken dinner. You're right. You got it. Now go home. The demon is gone. Your little girl is healed. What are we to make of this? This story is not told to show us that Jesus was powerful and the healer of the sick, though He was those things. It's not told to show us that Jesus will heal every sickness or disease if we will only persist in our prayers, though some might see it that way. The story is told once again to reinforce a constant and primary theme of Jesus' ethic and ministry. Jesus is the breaker of boundaries, literally and figuratively. He intentionally moves into the foreign places, into the marginal places, out to the borders, out to where we, His followers, are often incredibly uncomfortable. Jesus is always pushing the religious limits, always critiquing the institutional rules, always expanding the horizon, always making space for those regarded as incompatible or unacceptable. Jesus has a soft spot for fools, drunks, little children, starving puppies begging under the table. For the poor, the rejected, for those whose noses have been bloodied by 100 slamming doors. For the weak, the down and out, the stained, the marked, and the failures. Jesus is always out there hanging with the crowd that we wouldn't be caught dead with. Always. For the life of me, I cannot figure out where today's church came up with this prim and proper, tame and courteous Jesus, who is little more than a mascot for middle and upper class respectability. This man was a revolutionary in the truest sense of the word, come to welcome all who would come, even if it alienated those who thought that they were the ones who had cornered the market on faith and belief in God, even if His words and way was seen as an affront to the religious establishment. I'll conclude today with the words of Brendan Manning. Manning was the author of the Ragamuffin Gospel. The book is 35 years old now, still a classic. The subtitle of that book is Good News for the Beraggled, the Beat Up, and the Burned Out. Most of us believe in God's grace, in theory, he said. But somehow we can't seem to apply it to our daily lives. We continue to see God as a small-minded bookkeeper, tallying our failures and successes on a score sheet. Yet God gives us reckless love, willingness, no matter what we've done or who we are. You may be insecure, inadequate, mistaken. Death, panic, depression, and disillusionment may be near you, but you are not those things. You are accepted. The outstretched arms of Jesus exclude no one, not the drunk in the doorway, the panhandler in the street, the most selfish and ungrateful in their cocoons, the most unjust of employers, and the most overweening of snobs. The love of Christ embraces all. And then he says this, speaking very personally, one of the most moving 2 paragraphs or so I've ever read. Because of His grace, I believe that among the countless number of people standing in front of the throne of God. I shall see the prostitute who tearfully told me that she could find no other employment to support her 2-year-old son. I shall see the woman who had an abortion and is haunted by guilt and remorse, but did the best she could, faced with grueling alternatives. The businessman besieged with debt who sold his integrity in a series of desperate transactions. The insecure clergyman addicted to being liked who never challenged his people from the pulpit and longed for unconditional love. The sexually abused teen molested by his father and now selling his body on the street, who as he falls asleep each night after his last trick, whispers the name of the unknown God he learned about in Sunday school. There they are. There we are. The multitude who so wanted to be faithful, who at times got defeated, soiled by life, and bested by trials, wearing the bloodied garments of life's tribulation, but through it all clung to faith. My friends, if this is not good news to you, you have never understood the gospel of grace. A prayer credited to George MacLeod. Will you pray with me? Come to Christ not because you are strong, but because you are weak. Come not because of any goodness of your own, but because you seek mercy. Come because you are trying to love the Lord a little and you would like to love Him more. Come because He loves you. Come, you who have had faith and you who would like to. You who have known God and you who have been suspicious of God. Come, you who have tried to follow Jesus, and come, you, especially those who have failed trying to follow Jesus. Come, it is Christ who invites us to meet Him at His table. And it's in Christ's name we pray.